Hey guys, welcome back to RMA Garage. I'm Mark, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about power converters. We're going to be talking about what they are and why we have one and how we use it. We're also going to be talking about how we hooked it up. All right, so let's get to it. So, what is a power converter? A power converter takes 12 volt DC from a battery and converts it to 120 volt AC to power small appliances. So you'd ask yourself, why would we need something like this when an RV is equipped with a generator and plenty of plugs to power all the things that we need? Well, in this RV, there is a feature when we are driving, the power to the television and the CD player is cut off. Apparently, the manufacturer doesn't want you watching TV while you're going down the road. So we had to come up with a solution, and this is our solution. This is a Schumacher power converter, 750 watt. So why did I purchase a 750 watt? The reason why is because I have a television and a CD player that puts out about 500 watts, so this is well within the operating range of the power converter. Now, some of the reasons I bought this particular brand is because it has some safety features. It already has a built-in fuse. There are two fuses here, and these are automotive fuses. And so if we ever had a problem, I could always go to a auto parts store and get what I need. So it's very convenient. It also has a fan on it, so if it starts to warm up a little bit, the fan will kick on to cool the unit down, but it'll also let me know that maybe I'm running too much power through the unit. It has two AC plugs, makes it a little bit more convenient if you got two things to run. And it's got an on and off switch with a power indicator so you know that it is on. And one other nice feature is it has a USB plug here that's rated for 2 amps. All right, so we picked the inverter that we wanted, and we thought that we could just use it just as it is, but we had to make some modifications to it. The first modification that I had to make was how that it attaches to the RV. Now, when I bought this inverter, it basically came with these two wires and alligator clips on the end. And those alligator clips obviously would hook to the battery terminals, and then you'd be able to use the inverter. The problem with that in our RV is that we have a battery box that is actually the step to get into the RV. Also, this step is hollow, and of course it has the batteries in it, but you can see the ground right there. And road noise would come up into this if we left this lid open. Also, too, when you are hooking up the battery terminals, they tend to spark a little bit because of the amperage of the power converter. So there were some things there that we loved about it and things that we didn't like about it. So I kind of had to come up with a plan on how to connect this thing, drive down the road, have it be perfectly safe, quiet, and usable. So the first thing I had to do was to come up with a way to attach the cables to the battery. And what I did was I bought battery cables from the auto parts store, and these are 4 gauge. So these are pretty beefy wires. The wires that came with them are 6 gauge. So I had to get large enough wires that would handle the amperage. All right, so I'm going to take a minute here to explain amperage, power inverters, and DC volts versus 120 volts. Okay, so the way that, here's a little math lesson here. When you have amperage coming through 120, you have to take your total watts here and you divide it by the voltage. So if I take 750 watts divided by 120, that gives me 6.25 amps. Not a lot of amps. But if you take 150 watts and divide it by 12, which is the DC, you have 62.5 amps. That's a lot of amperage. That's why we have such large cables. Large cables, lots of DC amps. Okay, so this was kind of hard for me to understand at first because I wasn't really versed in DC wattage and amperage. So I went to the auto parts store and I got the wires that I needed. Okay, so these are pretty beefy wires. We got them hooked up. We got them hooked up to the terminal, and I also put the plastic casing on it here, and this basically protects it from the vibration and put those back on when we're done. So I had the wires hooked up here. We have the wires that the unit comes with, and they connect with the wire nuts. But how was I to connect? So a friend of mine suggested a plug that they use for batteries on the back of fork trucks. So this plug here is rated for, I think, 180 amps, DC amps. So this is a huge, beefy plug. Now I'll put a link to in the description below on where to get this. But this is basically what you got to have when you have a possible 62.5 DC amps coming from the battery to the power converter. Okay, so I did my homework, I figured it out. Now we have these huge plugs. Well, we can't just loop them over the edge. We have to come up with a solution. So what we did is we drilled a hole in the side of the box, and then we feed these lines through from the inside out, and then these hook up to the power converter, and then these plugs, of course, plug in, and then these will be inside the battery box. There is only one concern that I had, and I had to make sure that the kids and my wife and remind myself, is that you have to plug these in first before you power it. Because if you plug this in, these wires are not very far apart from each other. As you can see, when you are putting the wires on here, there's a chance that you could possibly bump these when you put them together. You don't want to bump that because sparks will fly. So what we do is we attach these wires on first and then plug this in, and then you close the lid and everything is fine. So I wanted to go into a little bit more depth on how we wired this up. Okay, so we drilled a hole through here and then we put in a rubber plug. And this rubber plug is basically just a little rubber grommet that keeps the wires from rubbing on the metal. Now when we're not using it, we take a plug from the inside and we push it through. Okay, and then that is a waterproof plug. It also keeps the sound from the road from coming up through the box. Okay, so when we are going to use this, we're going to take this plug out, and we have our wires here and our plug for to the inverter. So we also made a little plug here, and it's really not for sound. It was basically just to keep it from rubbing again, and basically just holding the wires in place. So what we do is we feed the wires through, and then we take this little plastic piece and we shove it through the back. Okay, so that is connected. So now we want to connect these to the inverter. And again, I always like to do this without it being plugged in first. All right, so now that we have the inverter plugged in and the wires are good, the wire nuts are tight, everything is good, it's not going to bump. Now we can take these two, and as you can see, there's no way that you can get these reversed. One is flopped one way and one is the other. So you can't go basically this way. It doesn't work. It has to go this way. So fail safe. You plug that in. That gets closed. So everything is all hooked up. The power converter is ready to go. Basically all you have to do now is flip the switch and the green light comes on and you're ready to go. This is how we go down the road, and now we can plug what we need to what we want to power. And that would be this. So what we did was we ran an extension cord up to the front of the RV, and that is what's going to power the television and the CD player. All right, so here's the other end of the extension cord, and as you can see, we bought one that has the multiple outlets already molded in so nothing can fall out, and we ran this underneath The bench, basically, it's underneath. You take the pillows out and the plywood, and then this is where it comes out down here at the bottom and then plugs into the inverter. So we have our television and our DVD player, and this is the plug that they're supposed to plug into, but this is the socket that goes dead when we start driving. So we take the end of the extension cord, we plug the TV and the DVD player into this, and now the kids can sit and watch television, and they'll be able to power both of these appliances, and we're good to go for driving down the road. I also wanted to show you on how we protect this plug when it is not being used. Now again, I've showed you before that the batteries have a place to drain, and obviously you get road noise and maybe a little bit of water splashes up. There's a little bit of water spots there, so this thing isn't completely waterproof down below here. So when we have this plug, you know, we have these connections here that we want to keep nice. We put a little bit of dielectric grease on there to keep them from corroding, but you still want the dirt to get out. So what we did was, for a couple extra bucks, we bought this plug, and this plug basically sticks on the end there. It's a little rubber boot. Tuck it down in. And then everything is good to go. All right, guys, I wanted to show you one other thing. We made a little holder for this to fit inside the shelf. I didn't want it bouncing around. I didn't want to put it in the cardboard because that usually ends up dying after the first 2 or 3 times we use it. But basically, I found a piece of foam in a box in the attic, probably from a computer, and I hollowed it out, and now we have the converter sitting in this thing real nice and secure, and then it just sits on the shelf inside the cabinet, and it doesn't move around. It doesn't get, if it gets bumped, it just wiggles in its place. And that is how we store the converter inside the RV. All right, guys, so I wanted to show you one thing that goes along with our power converter, and that is this sleep machine. This is a device that the boys bought that allows them to sleep a little bit better when it's noisy, maybe outside. They just like the noise. Now, if you don't know what a sleep machine is, it basically makes a little bit of noise, background white noise. And it says this one is, how do you say that, dome? It says the original natural white noise machine, if you guys can see that. Okay, but this is something that we bought, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to power it. Now, obviously, we have the power converter, but we wanted to know, gee whiz, if we let this thing run all night, which is what it's designed to do, how much battery we're going to be using. So I wanted to show you on the back here, it says 18 watts. That's not a whole lot. So if we are dry camping and we have the batteries, 18 watts for 8 hours really isn't going to drain a lot from the batteries in the coach. We've done it. It hasn't been a problem. But that is something else that you can use your power converter for, is running a sound machine in the middle of the night. Okay, so again, to recap, this is the basic setup. I got my power converter here. I got the wires going through the box. I got my plugs, and they are wired into the batteries. This is pretty simple, but you have to make sure that you get it right and you use the right size wires. You got to use gauge, at least minimum gauge that it comes with. I used 4 gauge because that's what the auto parts store had. But this is how it's all set up. Somebody asked me about powering heaters. I guess you could power a heater if you bought a large enough converter. The problem is that do you have enough battery to power the heater for an extended period of time? I would not power a heater through a converter because, one, you're going to heat this up, you're going to drain your batteries, and all in all, it's going to be very difficult to try and keep it going and to keep everything cool and working properly. Okay guys, that's it for today's video. If you guys have any questions, leave a comment below and I'll do my best to answer them. I appreciate you guys watching. If you like this video, hey, click that like and subscribe button. Don't forget to click on the bell so you won't miss our next episode. I'm going to be doing a few more on the RV, a few more with the motorcycles, going back and forth. But if there's something that you want me specifically to cover, leave a comment below and I'll do my best. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.